Hi there, my name's Luke. Welcome to the Curious Creator Podcast. This is episode number 1, and I'm with a good friend of mine, Harrison Rolls King, and we'll be talking mostly about being a triathlete, being an athlete in general, what that kind of takes on, and a few other things. So, if you're interested, stick around. If not, I will have some other guests on that might be of interest to you, but let's get into it. So, Harrison.
Hey, how are you?
It's good to have you on. I've been meaning to do a podcast for about a year, so nice to have the person who kind of gave me the idea to, go through with it and be my first guest. But I think the main thing I wanted to talk about was kind of like the mindset of a triathlete. There's a lot of areas in sport, you kind of have these people that there's a certain mindset that you need to have. So with a weightlifter, like you're literally just prepping yourself to lift that big weight near the end of the day. But for you, it's very different. You've basically got to try and find a way to push yourself through 4 or 5 hours of just non-stop, just 100% effort all the way through.
Yeah, I think a mindset of a triathlete is quite unique in the respect that it's very much an individual sport. You're out there a lot of the time on your own or with a training group, and when you are with a training group, especially if you're in the pool, you're not obviously talking. So yeah, I think it is very somewhat single-minded. I think you've got to be prepared to go out there when it is cold in the winter and it is throwing it down and it's hailing and it's got wind in your face. But yeah, I think you've got to be pretty mentally tough to do it, at least at some sort of level. I think that every individual is different. You obviously need a lot of consistency in that, and it's like you're saying with the weightlifter, you're training to lift that big weight at the end. For us, I think where it differs is that you need that consistency day in, day out, session by session. And I think when you're trying to do that on a daily basis, it's also accepting that some days it's just not going to work. And you might just be too tired, you might be too sore or whatever, but it's that's all part of being human, I guess.
Yeah, but the thing is as well is this isn't just something that you just wake up with. This is something that you had to try and habituate to, because as a child you wake up, you're more than happy to go outside and play. You become a teenager, you want to stay indoors, you want to just sleep in. So it really is a mindset to kind of go out there and run in the rain, cycle in the rain, swim in the sea when the waves aren't so friendly. How long did it take you to kind of just basically, I guess, man up and do it, really?
Yeah, I think I've been doing triathlon for 12, 13 years now, and I think I originally came into the sport as a swimmer, and I think that for me very much defined that mindset of you are alone following the black line up and down the pool. So I think that is very much ingrained since I was quite a young age, because swimming and kind of tennis was always my first sports. So I think coming from that background obviously helps a lot. I think when you're potentially coming from a running background, you still have that, but I think you have that you have the skill set to adapt to it, but I think it is maybe slightly more challenging if you're coming from cycling or swimming.
Yeah, because you've got to try and take in the other elements, because if you're a cyclist, you're used to being in almost one position all the time, and if you want to break, you just stop pedaling and you're still moving. But then, because I do, cycling, and I did a couple of runs, and it really is a different mindset that you need. And I'm literally just like an everyday guy that would just go out and just go for a bike ride or go for a run. But the horrible thing is that when you're running and you stop, like, the failure kind of hits a bit faster than when you're cycling, because when you're cycling you can just kind of slow down, take a breath, like do a few slow pedals. You can also drop gears, of course, so you can kind of make it easier for yourself, and then when you're ready you can make it hard. But when you're running, you make it hard by going faster, and then you make it easy by going slower. But even when you're going slow, the contact you have with the ground still takes it out of you bit by bit.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there are a lot more technical elements in terms of technique to running as well. I think when you're in cycling, you're very much defined by the bike position that you have and the fitness that you have to meet the demands of like the road, of the terrain, or the elements that you're up against. But obviously, yeah, when running, you certainly have more technical challenges in terms of holding your form and your technique, and And also just staying relaxed, I think, is partly a massive one for a lot of people. When you're
Yeah.
getting tired, of staying relaxed and just trying to go with the flow of the fatigue that's
I guess
gradually
you could kind
creeping
of call
up.
those like the mini challenges, really. I mean, you've obviously got the big race, where you got all three, but within training itself, you've got to try and keep that pace, keep that form, because if you don't keep that form, it leads to injury and then leads to slower time. So it's almost like a domino effect, as it were.
Yeah, and I think like what a lot of athletes do in training obviously translates a lot onto the race course. And if you're not able to hit those targets day in day out in training, whether it be technical targets, whether they're things that you're having to improve on in your form, or whether it's things that you need to hit for physiological benefit or mental benefits, I think you're not just going to be able to pull them out the bag on race day because you won't have practiced those skill sets.
No.
And I think that's like the importance of, again, the consistency of training and the consistency of um, challenging yourself on a daily basis and being open to that.
Yeah, because I think you kind of take it. I mean, when we say triathlete, we are really just talking swim, bike, run. But you then also got the different races, which again mentally pushes you and physically pushes you. Now, traditionally, what would a normal kind of triathlon be for someone if they were coming into it?
Yeah, I mean, some, depending on their background and the fitness level, they might start off with like a super sprint, which would be like a 400-meter swim, a 10k bike, and a 2.5k run. So pretty short. Like if I was to do one, it'd be about half an hour. Some slower ones, 45 minutes, maybe even towards an hour. But yeah, and then you've got all the progressions going up through there, from up to sprint distance, which is double that. So 750-meter swim, 20k bike, and a 10k run. And then you've also got then up to Olympic distance, which is probably the top end of short course racing, which is obviously what they do in the Olympics, which stands at 1500-meter swim, 40k bike, and then a 10k run.
Yeah, because when you say short, that sounds extremely long to me.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the elites take about 2 hours. So
yeah, I mean,
the
yeah,
average person is going to be around about 2.5.
yeah, I mean
hours.
that's still like a long period of time, because obviously the Olympics is kind of seen as like the pinnacle of what sport in that area is. But obviously, I mean, if we're speaking about triathlons, you then got Ironmans, and those distances are what, double the length or about 3 times the length?
And then a bit more as well. So yeah,
Jeez.
like if you're looking at half Ironman, you've got half Ironman, or 70.3 distance, which some like to call it, which is essentially a 1.9k swim, 90k bike, and then a half marathon to finish, a 21.2k.
Ooh, no.
And then an Ironman's obviously double that. So yeah, it's a long day out.
Yeah, and I think to clarify for people, like, you're not wanting to do the short distance, i.e. the Olympic level. You're looking to do the Ironman level.
Yeah, I think it's been a decision that I'm only 22 still, so I've still got a lot of time to develop. But yeah, I grew up doing short course racing pretty much most of my triathlon career so far, and it's only really been the last 18 months that I've decided actually short course racing on short city circuits where it's really high intensity just isn't for me.
Yeah.
And I've always kind of like felt, even kind of growing up, that the non-drafting aspect to it, where you're out there on your own rather than riding around in groups, has a greater benefit for me and my strengths in terms of things like on the bike and things like that, because I'm come from a swimming background. Swimming is probably my strength, followed by closely with the bike. So I think if I can put that combination together in a non-drafting race, it provides quite hopefully a good advantage in that, when I've not got people just sat on my tail for the whole time.
Yeah, I guess is it also partially a physiological kind of reason behind it? Because obviously you're quite tall compared to quite most athletes. I mean, you probably got like another good 8 inches on them in terms of height. So did that have anything to play with it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 6'3". I'm not the smallest of 6'3s. I'm not skinny as a rake naturally. I am somewhat of a swimmer's build. So yeah, I think partially my physiology was working more towards that longer sit on a higher intensity for a longer period of time sort style race. But I think you can always train your physiology to do different things, but I think I just naturally prefer to do just drilling it out day in day out all the time. I mean, when I was doing short course racing, I was always found myself sat on the front of bike packs and just dragging the pack round on bike courses, and like after a while that gets quite frustrating when you've got no one really willing or wanting to help you. So it's I thought, sod it, I'm going to ditch you guys and go solo.
Because I guess like when you're the front of the pack, it's great when you first start doing it, because like, wow, I'm number one. And then as you get older, you learn about slipstreams and things. You're like, hang on a minute, they're taking advantage of me and what I can do. But I'm obviously within a Ironman, there's a longer distance, it's easier for people to get spread out, so it really is one man fighting for survival. And if you do come across one person, it's only going to be one person gaining anything from that.
Yeah,
stream.
and you certainly have to race your own race in that respect. I think Kona, Hawaii, being the Ironman World Championships highlights that to many people every year. It's so unlikely that you're going to go there for the first time and have a great race. If you do, I mean, that's great, but there is such a small handful of people, because of the elements there that you're facing, not just the course itself, the high quality of athletes that always turn up year in, year out, and also the environment of the heat and everything there. So I think you have to stick to your guns in that respect. You can obviously push on, stay with people within bike groups, but not drafting. But you obviously run the risk of overheating when you get to the run, or fizzling out, which a lot of people have found when they've put that risk out there. And
because they've got to learn to battle the elements, because obviously being a Brit, we're used to just dealing with the rain, the cold, so obviously transitioning from that over to Kona, that must be quite a big slap in the face.
Yeah, I mean, admittedly I've never been, and I think I probably won't go for a good few years, but I think I think a lot of athletes tend to go over to the States, Arizona being quite a good base for that. Some people go out to Hawaii and use some of the other islands, not just Kona itself. Like Maui's quite a popular one for training in there for about a month before. Or Lanzarote, if you're more European based, is also very good for that sort of thing. So yeah, there are ways that you can adapt to it, and if you are still stuck in the UK, then teaming up with sports scientists is obviously a really handy thing, and getting in the labs. So yeah,
I mean, what kind of benefits do you get from being in the labs? Like, is it just, I mean, because the thing is, and I was having a chat with Jake, who I'm also looking to get on the podcast at some point. He's an endurance runner, and we were talking about how you've always got a watch on you, and it's always telling you your heart rate. So you're basically just given this data. But I mean, how does that translate to you as an athlete when you're given all this data?
I think it works for different people. I have a degree in sports science, sport and exercise with nutrition, and I think for me it's obviously quite a lot easier to go into labs, know exactly what the numbers are that I'm pushing out, or the environments that I'm able to deal with or not deal with.
Yeah, I guess you also have the background knowledge of knowing where you should be as well.
Yeah, or knowing where I want to be.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think for me, I can just take it in and absorb it. But I think that's the benefit of working with sports scientists themselves, where if they're a good sports scientist, they can then translate it to an athlete who may not have the knowledge base that they do, to help them understand and how they can benefit their training or adapt
Would
their
that
training.
benefit someone getting into being a triathlete? Or is that kind of stretching it?
Not so much. I think because it's such a specific thing, I think that when you're in the labs and things, I think you'd want a good few years of experience within the sport to really gain a proper benefit from it. Don't get me wrong, like you can obviously gain some sort of training benefit and you can tailor programs around it, but I think sports science is there to really help you find the small percentages. And I think if you're still massively developing as an athlete or as an amateur athlete, then I think that actually that's probably one of the later things you then tend to look at. Heart rate monitors and things as a whole, great training tool. to make sure that you're training in the right zone as an amateur athlete. But I think when you're getting towards the higher end of sport, it's those sorts of things that
because I guess it kind of breaks down to, and we're going to be having Jake on the show later down the line, but we were talking about like at what point in an athlete's career does the data become more important. Because in my mind, because I've done a bit of work within sports science, I always feel like it's like 70% you and then it's 30% data. Because you can have a look at the data as a newbie and you're saying, oh, your heart rate's off here, your pace is off here, but if you don't understand what you're doing, you won't understand how to translate that data to real practice.
And that's kind of where the sports scientists themselves, the guys that are running the test, would then help you. I think that's the primary key, is who you're working with as well. Whether it be also your coach, if they understand it as well. If you've got a coach that's got a background in the sport that you're doing, or endurance sport as a whole, and they've got massive experience of that, then they will have a good knowledge base of sports science and how they can then adapt your training to
do most triathletes have a coach?
I think the triathlon world is very very unique in the respect that you'll have face-to-face coaches.
Yep.
And they'll see athletes or groups of athletes and training groups and clubs and stuff on a daily basis or every couple of days or whatever. But then you've also got this massive industry now, which is always rapidly growing, of like virtual coaches essentially. So they'll set online programs using things like Training Peaks and things like that, where you won't necessarily see them. You maybe catch up with them every week or every couple of weeks or every month, and you'll essentially pay them a monthly fee, and they'll write you a program, which a lot of athletes can also tend to do as well. They can write programs for other athletes.
I kind of see like the virtual
athletes.
side of things. I can kind of see that working more so for people getting into it. Yeah. Especially if they don't know the training regimes, they don't know where to start. Like having a virtual coach be like, this is what you need to start with, these are the drills you need to run, and then later on maybe have a look at getting a head-to-head coach. Yeah,
I think whilst that's obviously really positive in that respect, that it gives you a starting point to get started with, I think because of things like swimming, and especially swimming and running, I think you really need that face-to-face contact, because the technical aspects to it, you can have a program and follow the program as much as you like, but if your technical aspects aren't there, then the program's not going to be followed accurately, or it's not going to be able to develop the progression that you would want from the program that the coach would envisage. But yeah, I think if starting out athlete, find a club, because you've also got the social aspect there. You can learn so much from all the other individual athletes that are training there as well. You also, the social life as well is also quite key, and the triathlon community is always so welcoming with that respect. I think even at races, like people you don't even know, like they say well done, and like they'll go for coffee or whatever, and it's not a very snobby atmosphere.
No, it sounds like there's very good sportsmanship, which I think is missing from a lot of other sports.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and I guess when you're doing triathlons, especially Ironmans, it's quite much an individual sport. And then when it comes down to crunch time, everyone kind of backs each other up, hypes each other up, and then you kind of all power through, because you're all basically suffering the same pain.
For sure. And I think sometimes, like, in the heat of the moment on the race course, like, I don't know, when you're in bike packs, it, in my experiences, it can get quite heated and quite sweary, but as soon as you kind of cross the finish line, it's like it's all kind of forgotten in that respect, because it all just kind of happens at the moment. You all kind of understand, you've all been there.
Yeah.
It may not be having a great day out in the racing, or you might be having a great day or whatever, but I think there is that kind of like that community respect in the fact that what happens on the race course tries to stay on the race course.
Yeah, you need more of that.
Yeah.
I think we live in a world where people become quite selfish and they kind of close each other off. And having sport in general, I think, really opens people up. I found myself when I was doing karate, my confidence really helped. It really boosted that, and it basically enabled me to kind of push further in my career as a photographer, approach people, ask for things, which is a thing I never usually do, and that kind of grew into us ending up working together, which I think was quite fun.
Yeah.
So that definitely, I mean, I think what's nice about shooting sports is it's in the complete opposite of what I'm doing. So creatively, I've got to think outside the box because it's a completely different box for me. So there is that element to it. But I guess the thing that people are wondering is, why would a triathlete need a photographer?
Yeah, I think. I mean, how long have we been working together? Probably
3 or 4 years, maybe
no,
longer.
I think we've been working closer to 6.
6.
6
Jeez,
years.
okay, I'm losing count.
I'm pretty sure it's closer to 6-7 years.
Because we were still in college, weren't we?
We were still in college. I'm just over a year out of uni, so yeah, it's coming up to 6 years, which is kind of crazy. Really, time really does fly. But yeah, I think in terms of working with brands, I think obviously when you're getting towards elite level triathlon or sport in general, sponsors and brands that you choose to work with or are able to work with, I think then becomes really important to help you on your journey, not just in terms of equipment and stuff, but also potentially things outside of sport once you finish sport, if that makes sense, or if it ever finishes.
Because let's face it, being a triathlete isn't cheap.
Fuck off. No,
I mean,
I've really
seen some of the gear you have, and I'm sitting there like, yeah, my camera gear ain't even worth half of this.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I'm sitting there like, I mean, I've got camera, laptop, lenses, bags, you know, all the other bits and pieces you need. I mean, a car as well. I mean, my car is probably worth the same amount as your bike.
Yeah.
Which is, for most people, I've got a £3,000 Mini, and your bike's scraping that? Maybe a bit more than that?
It's close to.
Close, yeah. Well, also maintenance on your end as well. You've got to maintain the rims, the gears, and that's going to be consistent given how much you train as well.
Yeah, it's certainly not a cheap sport, and I've been really lucky to work with brands like global brands such as Blue 70 for a number of years, and now more recently Yonder Sports, based more in the UK, and Sundried. And I think when you're able to have brands like that on board, it not only helps you in the kit respect and financial respect, it develops a whole new skill set. Like for me, I've always been quite a big fan growing up of social media, and I think I jumped on it quite quickly and realised quite quickly that if you want to get brands on board, that was the way that you had to go, and you had to have kind of quality content. I think more so in the last like 3 or 4 years it's become even more profound in the elite, like in the pro world, when you're looking at the podium athletes of World Series races or like World Championship races. They've all got some sort of media team with them, either at that race or on a date or on some sort of basis.
Because it really has changed in that sense. Because I mean, with media in general, it's completely changed the way the world works. I mean, you've got people that wouldn't necessarily need they wouldn't need a phone 20 years ago in their sport, but now it's almost part of what you need. Because essentially, as a triathlete, you've got to get the sponsors in, and to do that, you've got to turn yourself into a brand. So it's a whole other world, and if you're not into it, it's a lot harder for you to get sponsorships.
For sure. I don't think it's near impossible, but I think it really makes it a lot more challenging to then offer something that the brand can use from you. And I think when you look at athletes such as Lucy Charles, she's just reached 100,000 followers on Instagram, probably the most that any triathlete's got at the moment. And then you look at Lionel Sanders, who his YouTube channel is massive. It's got over 100,000 subscribers, and that took off really quite rapidly with his YouTube channel. And both of them have worked with a guy called Talbot Cox and James Mitchell, who are pretty big in terms of like the triathlon sports photography, and they've really developed the photography side and the content that they're creating to really suit the athletes' needs and really pump out so much content so that athletes can just choose it on a daily basis and just
Yeah, and
throw
that's
stuff
kind
out
of how
there.
we've worked, really. I mean, we would go out, we would either do I think one we haven't done for a while is a swim, but they tend to be the ones we do in summer.
Yeah.
We haven't really done a run one. Well, not until recently when we did shoot with Sun Dried.
Yeah.
Previous was Yonder. I
Yeah,
think
Yonder we did
shots.
one as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bike. I don't think we've done a bike for a while, but we did that one probably early spring or late spring. I can't remember which way around it was, but we did, you on the bike on the downs. I think being where we are down in Sussex, when it comes to choosing a location, that's the easy bit.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we really are sport for choice, and we're like, oh, do we want to go to the downs or do we want to go to the beach? Do we want to go by the cliffs? And I think that has another element to the brand as well, as your location. And I think being down in the Sussex Downs, surrounded by the hills, it really does help. And I think as a photographer, being able to put a subject in different locations and they're still able to go about their routine is really, really effective.
Well, I think for me, like, I train in those environments all day long, like Beachy Head and the beach in the summer. Like, I love sea swimming, and like it obviously makes the working relationship so much more comfortable when the athlete feels at home. And I think that totally translates to the global stage when you look at other athletes and photographers literally just follow them in their own normal training environment, because that's where they're most natural.
Yeah.
And that's how you get, I think you'd probably agree, the best content.
Yeah, I think when you can get the raw emotions of an athlete, you're showing them as a human, not as a subject. And that is something I've always tried to look for. And it's partially why I like to make you do laps. Because I like to weigh you down a little bit so you can kind of see you trying to work for it. Because when people see that you're working for it, this isn't just like another posy photo shoot. This is like I'm getting you training, and then I'm taking pictures of you training. And I think you can get a bit more out of the person doing it that way. I mean, if you're a photographer and looking to get into sport, it is very fun. Obviously, depending what sport it is, there's different ways of accessing it and accessing the athletes. But I think there's such a different way of shooting triathletes for me that I really enjoy. I like the fact that we can mix it up, because with other sports it tends to be one scene. If you're a weightlifter, that tends to be the gym or outside the gym. With a triathlete, you're shooting it in 3 different places, so you get to explore the elements, as it were. You get to kind of cover the water, and you get to cover the land, and you get to cover the air as well, especially when you're cycling, because you're basically combating the air as you're driving through. The only thing that's touching the ground are 2 little wheels, and that's it. So it really does kind of meet all the elements, so it does make it fun for me to shoot. But I guess where I'm going with this is, it just comes down to the quality content. Like, it's all well and good having a photographer, but it also comes down to the scenes you put them in, and it comes down to how you photograph them. And I think that has a massive play in how that affects sponsorships as well. Because if it shows that you work for it in your photos, then you definitely work for it in your training.
Yeah, but I think certainly with that, yes. But I also think that the content's got to be authentic in terms of, like, if I'm not someone that full on gurns when I'm going all out on the turbo, I wouldn't do that in a picture. So it's one of those things that I think is really important, that as much as the content is there for whether it be product or brand promotion, whether it be yours or the companies that you're working with, I think you've also got to be so authentic to who you are as an athlete and who you are as a person. And you've also, I think, got to translate that, because I think that's just as important.
Yeah.
To translate that we are all human, and anyone can do triathlon to the level that they want to, as long as they put the commitment or they train for what they need to. And I think that is a real key factor in triathlon, is that it's not just going to a location day in day out. You can go anywhere. You can do it anywhere. You can go and swim in lakes, you can swim in sea, you can ride up hills, you can ride on the flats, you can ride off-road, on-road. Same with running. And I think that for me is what keeps the daily grind interesting.
Yeah.
Although some would beg to differ that I don't vary it as much as others, but yeah, and I think that's what triathlon is all about. It's exploring not only yourself but the environment and the world that you live
Yeah,
in.
I think that's a nice way of putting it because a lot of people focus on the sport, they focus on the training, but as a person, there's obviously other elements that you enjoy, not just, putting yourself through absolute pain and stress. It's the ability to be able to go out and enjoy where you live and explore in a very different way.
Yeah, obviously there's a time and a place, and
Yeah.
there are key sessions in the week that you do have to get done in certain places, and you can't replicate anywhere else because those are the ones that have to get done to get you where you want to go.
Mm.
But yeah, in terms of like working with brands and things like that, I think as long as your views and your personality and your drive and your passion for what you do translates and correlates well with the brands that you're working with, I think then that provides a really good platform for partnerships and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of over the years, I mean, you kind of went into it with Blue 70, Yonder, and Sundried. But when it came to getting hold of these brands, what was kind of a barrier you saw in your head that really wasn't really a barrier?
I think for me, it's probably the results at the time that I was putting out. Like, I'd be the first one to say I probably wasn't the best athlete when I am and was working with those brands. And I think I'm still developing in the respect that I'm still learning how to race long course stuff, like 70.3 stuff. And I think, yes, I'm 22. I haven't been to European Championships like some other athletes have and things like that. And I think, but I offer something different in terms of what the brand wants. And I think from the very beginning of when I was looking for new wetsuits and things like that, I looked for brands that I really liked their product and I really liked their ethos and their ethics and the way that the company works, and those things really matter to me. And then looking, how can I make that company better?
Yeah.
Because they're obviously trying to make me better with the kit that they provide me or are able
Of
to
course,
give
so
me access to.
you've got to have that mutual kind of benefit. And if one benefits more than the other, it's not really a fair relationship.
Of course, and I
Yeah.
think whether it's contracted, uncontracted, or whatever, I think when you're working with a brand, you've always got to be putting yourself out there to make them better, because they can always throw as much kit or as much support as you need
Yeah.
to be able to do that, or as much as that they can.
Yeah.
But in terms of what we can offer as athletes, is probably actually a lot slimmer than what they can offer as a company.
Yeah. I guess also as well, people need to be reminded that it's not all about the gear. Like, the gear comes later.
You can have all the gear, but you might still have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, your thing is, like, it's the same with, I mean, I think it goes for everything, but for us as photographers, you can have a £5,000 camera. It doesn't make you a better photographer than a person with a £500 camera.
But if you can't use it, you don't know how to use
Exactly.
it.
I mean, there's no point buying it if you're not going to use it in the way that it should be used, because you don't know what that is. Like, you get people that will buy a professional camera and then they'll come in and complain like, why isn't there an auto setting on this? And it's like, because the pros don't use auto except for autofocus. And they're like, oh, can I get a refund please? They're like, yeah, sure, what do you want? I'll go with that one. Oh, the £3,000 camera that does have auto. Okay, cool. It's like, it doesn't make you a better photographer. And I think people, even in sport, you've got to practice. Like, if you go out on a run or you go out on a cycle and you have a bad kind of a time, don't beat yourself up over it. It's probably just a day, and then just move on. And it's the same with photos. Like, you can go out, take 100 and none of them are good, but the best thing you can do is go out again, take 100 photos and like one, because that one is the one that's going to make you a better photographer. And then when you go out 100 more times, get the 100 photos you did like, and then rule all of them out and say, right, I've got to choose my top 3. And that's what's going to make you a better photographer. And I guess translating that over to sport is obviously your best times. Like, you get your 3 best times in the last 6 months, and you're like, right, I've got to try and beat those times.
Yeah, and I think, and it's learning how you're going to beat them. I think for you in photography is like, what made that one in that 100 shots your favourite shot?
Yeah, I
and
think
then
it's
translate.
creativity.
Yeah, but
I think that's where we differ.
what processes did you put to put in place to make sure that you got that shot? Whether it was just the right lighting in the environment.
Yeah,
or...
I think a lot of our photos really has just come down, I guess you could argue, potluck. I mean, we've had some really good days when we've gone out and shot and we're like, damn, these come out real nice.
They have come out really
and
good.
I think the one that's the most memorable one is a shoot we did with Blue 70 and we had you bursting out the water.
Yeah.
I think those are some of my favourite ones, and for the people who I want to try and imagine this, imagine having someone duck under the water in the sea and then they push themselves up through it. So they got all the water and it's like perfectly frozen to the point where you can see the droplets, there's no blurred anything. And they're just bursting out of the water, all the water's being sprayed out, and that's the photo.
The lighting that day was
Oh yeah, it was probably
really good.
As a photographer, that is the worst lighting ever because it was no cloud, all sun, middle of the day, and contrast was high. So I literally had to shoot at an angle where the sun wouldn't go into the lens and cause lens flare and white everything out, but at the same time still get the details of Blue 70 and yourself in the photos. So in that element it was a challenge. So potluck, yes, because of the settings I had to go into, and I was like, wait, we can do something with this. So I think it's salvaging the opportunity. I guess you could also say it's the cloud with the silver lining.
Yeah, and I distinctly remember with that day, the sea was really clear.
So
the
clear.
water was so clear, and we just don't get that in Eastbourne because
No.
we have a lot, because we're on the coast of the UK, we get a lot of wind, it churns up the sea quite often.
Yeah.
And you kind of need a good solid week period where the sea's just pretty calm for it all to settle.
Yeah.
And when it does, it's lush. It's like
Beautiful.
swimming in the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
You can see right down to the bottom so far out. And I think we were just really lucky that day. We haven't had one really since, have we?
No, and
where the water's been that clear.
3 or 4 years ago, wasn't it?
That was
it's
2015, 16.
Yeah, so that's about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yikes! No, that's Oh God, you see, I've always wanted to recreate that shoot, but at the same time, I don't want to touch it
Yeah.
because it's like I've
'Cause
been
you'll
there,
never quite get
done
there.
that. Yeah, well, it's not just that because like, I don't know. I kind of want to be like, if I go back and reshoot it, will it be better? And it's like, what if it isn't? And what if it is? It's like, is that weird battle? Like, I know I can get a really, really good photo out of it because I already know the outcome. But then there's the side of me like, you already know the outcome, so why are you trying?
I think leave it and go for better.
Yeah, it's
or
like
something
there's a
else.
challenge, and I think the other challenge is obviously we got rocks down by the cliffs, and have you, because obviously it's not just rocks all the way through, but there's like a wall of rocks. Have you jump off that into the sea? And I think catching that, but doing it with a waterproof camera or having a case on the camera so you get under the water and above the water, so you're jumping off the rocks and you're halfway between getting into the water and out. I think that would be a really, really good shot to get.
It would.
But to get that, we need clear days.
Yeah.
And I need to get myself a waterproof housing. So there's a lot
in
of
the
elements.
water.
And I got to get in the water, and I'm not a big fan of doing that. So I think that's another element you got to try and get used to is getting into situations you're not fully comfortable with.
Yeah.
Like when I was younger, I was like a fish.
Yeah.
And then as I got older, I got like earaches from swimming and ear infections. I was like, nah, I can't keep doing this. And then eventually, because I was originally from Zimbabwe, so when they put chlorine in the water, they would put the bare minimum because it was so expensive. Whereas over here, you guys just flip the whole bottle in, and then I go in there, walk out with red eyes, and like, why is this acid burning my face? I need to realise that you guys use loads of chlorine.
We do.
But yeah, no, over there you didn't really have it because you would just kind of drain it out and then just refill it. But over here, water is a bit more scarce. It's weird, we're on an island, but water's a bit more scarce.
Yeah.
Because it's all well and good being surrounded by seawater, but that's not very helpful if you want to keep your eyes open
No.
and keep your body clean.
No.
But I guess that's another element you kind of got to play with when you're out swimming. You got to be careful of swimming in salt water for long periods of time.
Yeah, I think, like, for me, it dries my skin out a little bit during the summer, which isn't necessarily a bad thing at times. But, no, yeah, I mean, I've never really been able to open my eyes underwater anyway, so I've never really experienced the whole red eye thing.
Yeah,
It's
not nice.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a swimmer since I was, like, 5, and I still can't open my eyes
But
underwater.
the thing is, I still have this, like, very vivid memories of being able to open my eyes underwater and be able to see everything. Like, I couldn't not see things. And when I opened my eyes over here in the UK, I was older, and I opened my eyes like, everything's a blur. Why is it a blur? But then I think about it, I'm like, Or maybe it's my eyelashes. Maybe I've got air bubbles. So I
As
would
you
like
sit
rub
here
my
wearing
eyes
glasses.
underwater and be like having a look around, like, nope, still blurry as shit. Like, this ain't working. So yeah, there's like, I don't know, things just kind of change as you grow up, and you got to get used to things. But I mean, as I got older, my swimming just went down. Like, if you don't do something, you don't get better.
Yeah.
And I think you learn that very quickly. I mean, I've done karate for over 4.5 years solidly, and had like a year out because of work and college. I went back, and yeah, you feel it very, very quickly, especially on a fitness side of things.
Yeah.
I mean, I was once out of karate for like a whole month. I went back and I felt like I lost all of my stamina. Like, people don't realise you got to stay on top of it. You can't just, train every now and then, do a triathlon. It's not going to work like that.
Again, consistency.
Exactly.
It's the key.
Consistency is key. And I
Yeah.
think we've all heard that saying at some point in our lives, and I think that applies to a lot of things. But I think as well as all of that, the consistency is the discipline.
Yeah.
Like, it's all well as good as saying, I'll be consistent in summer when the sun's out, but then it's like having the mental ability to be like, oh, it's chucking it down. Oh, I've got to run anyway. Let's just, put the
Get
shoes
on
on
with
and go
it.
out. Yeah. And just go out and just run in it, come back, have a warm shower. Just think of things like that to keep you
Yeah.
going.
No, exactly. And I think it's... Yeah, it is one of those things, and one could argue that your photography got a lot better when you reduced your karate, but...
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think for me it was just like I had more chances to be openly creative. I did find it difficult in the beginning because I was like, right, how am I going to photograph a triathlete? And I think our first shoot was on the bike, I want to say, or did we do one before that?
No, I think we were in the water.
The water.
I'm trying to think. We were...
Oh, was that not you running in and out of the water?
Yeah,
was that our first one?
it was very much land-based swimming, I'm going to call it.
Yeah.
I didn't spend a lot of time in the water.
We were. I think the brief on the day was, we'll just get shots of you running in the water and then running out of the water, because it'd be like you going in for the swim and you coming out from the swim, and I think that was basically it.
Yeah,
I think
we were quite limited on our creative aspects on that.
Yeah,
day.
I think because we were still, new to each other, trying to learn how to communicate our ideas. But as we got older, we got to know each other, and then it kind of opened up to the point like, I want to make you jump off a rock. If we did that 5 years ago, you would have been like, what? I'm not jumping off a rock. That's dangerous. I'm like, but now I can be like, trust me. And you're
Yeah.
like, okay, I trust you. And it's that element that really helps, because I think we can kind of push the boat out a little bit more. And it's definitely opened up opportunities in terms of what I want to do when it comes to shoots, rather than what do I think you'd be okay with.
Yeah, and I think I'm quite a creative person as well.
Yeah, I think
we work quite well in that respect. That
yeah,
when we're on a shoot, like if I literally am like midway through something and I'll go, oh my god, that'd be so cool if we could like create that, what's going on in my head, because I'm quite a visual person like that. I'm not afraid to just like blurt that out at you,
yeah,
and then like try and recreate it in your head, to try and see if like that can then be almost like translated.
Yeah.
I think one that we did with Yonder was when I remember one where you were laying on the gravel
yeah,
and I had to run and almost like hurdle you.
yeah. I remember
And
that.
just so that you could catch me landing from behind but super close from
Yeah.
a ground perspective,
Yeah.
which I think looked sick.
Yeah. And if people want to see these, what's your username on Instagram?
HRK_triathlete.
Yeah, if you go to that, you'll see all the photos we've done, just kind of,
Yeah, it's kind of
Stalk
like a
a
massive
bit.
archive of Luke Gardner / Harrison.
yeah, it's
really.
like my second portfolio.
Yeah.
I just kind of use it like that. So anything I'm tagged in, that's my portfolio.
Yeah.
In fact, if you go onto my one, which is at the Luke Gardner, if you go into my tagged, it's mostly Harrison.
It pretty much is.
And then, a few from the girlfriend, a few from friends. But yeah, it's mostly just Harrison be like, here's another one of your photos. But I think what's nice is that it's nice to know that as a creator, the photos are being used.
Yeah.
And, like, I guess you always get that kind of buzz when we're doing a shoot, like, oh, this is quality content. This is going to go so well.
Yeah.
And I think the other element for me is to make sure that the photos are good enough. So if you want to get another sponsor, you've kind of already got photographer ready and waiting.
Yeah.
Because you can just turn and be like, yeah, no, I've got my own photographer, and they're like, oh, really? Okay, we might send you a few things.
Yeah, and I think I think Yonder have been great in tagging you in pictures as well.
Yeah.
Things that they've used and reposted from my stuff,
Yeah,
which I think is really good in the respect that they respect you as someone that's also working with the athlete that they're working with.
Yeah, and I think from my aspect, it's like the acknowledgement is nice, because you come across a lot of brands that, I don't know if they're too big for you, but they don't really acknowledge you. They'll use your stuff, they'll tag you, but they won't really go out of the way to, like, when you post one and you tag them, is whether or not they reply to you rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
I think there's like an extra element to that, and if you're a brand, that really, really benefits us, because it gives us like, oh, these people acknowledge me, rather than me acknowledging them. And it's just there's a little bit more to it.
Yeah, and I think Yonder are really, really good at that. I mean, they're
really
such a small team anyway, and I was really lucky to go and do some work with them up at the London Excel Centre at the Tri Show back in March this year, and I was able to really get to know Angus and Sally, who pretty much run the whole show really, and they do a lot of like just kind of everything from like design to managing athlete, like the partnerships they have with their ambassadors and their athletes, and even all the financial side of it and everything. And they do such a good job of this massive juggling act that actually they really care about their brand, they really care about their sport, and they really care about developing their brand and developing the clubs and the teams and the athletes within the sport, so that they can create long-term partnerships with athletes. And I think, like, even just sharing things on social media, no matter whether it's, I don't know, Susan did her first triathlon, she hired out a Yonder wetsuit, or whether it's, I don't know, Kaya, who was a TriStar 2 at like 12 years old, and cool. She's just raced her first like interregional championships. I think it's supporting both ends, as well as like the elite athletes as well.
On like a brand business sense, like if you support your athletes, the athletes are going to talk about you, and they're going to want to work with you more and more.
Exactly.
And that's only going to push your brand even further, because if you are acknowledged for good sportsmanship, just on like a branding like partnership basis, that goes a long way.
Yeah, for sure. And I think social presence now as a company is so important and key to the fundamental success of its products. When you're launching new products, when you're even just promoting products that are pre-existing, I think social media is obviously kind of the place for that to go out, because so many people have it now. And I think what Yonder, I think, has done really well is they've invested so much time into developing relationships with the regional academies and with like Triathlon England and things like that, so that they've got these pockets of people that are wearing their kit, whether it's funded, part funded, or fully paid for, or whatever, that are all very social media active because they're of that generation. And they've tapped into such a massive pool of people that is constantly being reviewed on an annual basis within the academies, and they're constantly getting an influx of new people that want to join the academy, and they're seeing this brand and relating that to the success that other athletes in the academy or other academies across the country are having. And it then becomes this massive wheel of constant coverage online that actually Yonder doesn't necessarily have to do that much work in terms of producing content, because
it certainly reduces the ads that they need to do, because they've got all their athletes talking about them, and they're
then all the content is then self-produced essentially from the athletes, and they just have to share it, which is what they're brilliant at.
And the thing is we don't really, I mean, I don't get paid from the shoots, but I really enjoy shooting with you and working with you, and having the brand itself just acknowledge what we're doing is like payment enough for me, because it's all well and good doing a shoot and then the brand is like, yeah, okay, cool, thanks, we'll use these. But it's like, oh, these are great, well done. Would you mind if we send you a few more to do a shoot with them? Like, yeah, sure, as long as we're allowed to do what we want to do.
Yeah.
I mean, the minute the brand starts asking us to do certain things, that's when I'm like, right, okay, so if you want this, then we have to look at, some form of payment. But if you literally just hand me a bunch of clothes and be like, just do what you want, I'm like, okay, cool. Because to me, that's payment enough, because it gives me a chance to be creative. Whereas with other clients, they want a vision to be fulfilled, and that's when you pay them. And I think doing work with you and the brands, it opens me up into what I can do, because when you end up shooting lifestyle, commercial, and just kind of general photos, when you get a phone call from Harris and be like, yeah, I need you to take pictures of me diving out of this or cycling along this, I'm like, yeah, I'm down, because it gets me doing something different, it gets me thinking differently, and at the end of the day, it allows me to explore that area of sport. I think shooting with you has definitely opened me up as a photographer to be like, wouldn't mind shooting a bit more sport. And then I eventually met Jake, we've done a shoot together, I'm like, it's different, I can do something with this, I've got to learn. And we did a shoot together, and I was basically just like ducking behind bushes and shooting through the bushes of him running. Because endurance running, you've really got to think about the terrain rather than the subject. So I'm literally writing places I can take him, and like have him running down hills, running him through mud, and just like really horrible kind of places. But when you look back at it at a photographic point of view, it's going to really be punchy. And, the relationship needs to build between me and Jake before I can be like, yeah, I want to throw you in some mud and then make you run down a hill.
Yeah.
We've got like a good few years on that before I can do that. But that is my goal. It's to basically... I think a lot of photographers need to do this as well, is don't just have a client that you just kind of go to every now and then, but kind of like, if you really enjoy the shoots you do, obviously naturally you're going to build up that friendship. And I think that's when you can start being a bit more, I wouldn't say demanding, but you can be a bit more upfront and open. I think open is a better word, of what you want to do with them. And I think, having you jumping off a rock is probably next year's plan.
I'll be full on risk assessing that. Don't you worry.
Don't. Please don't. I think what we'll do, go there when the tide's out, make sure a rock's not there, and wait for the tide to come in, and oh wait, the tide brought in a rock. Oopsie. So yeah, I think that's some of the crazy things as well, as working on the seas. You have to dive down, make sure there's nothing there that's gonna like
kill me
or kill you. And then we're like, right, let's do a few dry runs, and you come out on top, I count to 10, your head pops up, no, okay, still good, and then we just keep going from there. But God forbid I count 10 and you don't pop up. That will be the day.
I'll have to get your lifeguard trained.
Yeah, probably.
Baywatch trained. I mean, I am.
Can you imagine me just splashing around in the water like, have I put...
I mean, it'd be hysterical. I'd probably die laughing rather than drowning.
Yeah, I think I get a solid F for that one, because I just don't know, swimming just isn't my thing. I mean, I watch people just like kicking their legs and staying above the water. I start doing that, I feel like a sinking sock. I just start going, so I'm like, why is my head getting okay, I'm kind of like holding my head up now, this is really hard, kicking faster, okay, I'm losing breath, now I'm panicking. So I don't know, maybe I need bigger feet,
or just bigger in general.
Oh, height joke. Lovely. That's what I needed. I love a height joke.
There's probably a good half a foot between you and I.
Comfortably. I'm 5'7" and you're 6'3", so yeah, there's a good foot between us, which makes my neck hurt sometimes. So you have to stand at a distance, or you got to sit down for me, which is probably why most of our briefs are sat down.
They always
Doesn't
are.
hurt. Okay, easy now. But thank you, Harrison, for coming on. I really enjoyed our podcast. Going to have you back on again, talking about many other things, including one which we'll hint at, which is aviation.
Yeah.
A little interest of yours, like a side hobby, shall we call
guilty
it?
pleasure, as I probably
Guilty
look at
pleasure.
it.
I like that. But yeah, thank you very much for coming on. This has been The Curious Creator. I'm Luke, and we'll see you next time.
See you later.